You're listening to the Write Project podcast and radio program, a show about writing and modern Newfoundland author culture. This program is produced and recorded at CHMR FM 93.5 FM in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, and is aired on other great stations in the province and elsewhere in the country. It can also be heard online at www.chmr.ca. I'm your host, Matthew LeDrew. Welcome to a very special episode of the Write Project podcast. Today, we've got a host of authors on to answer one of the most frequent questions that's asked of any author. We're asking them, what literary pilgrimages have you gone on, if any? And today to answer, we have on Brad Dunne, author of After Dark Vapors. What literary pilgrimages have you been on, if any? Have you gone on vacation to write? Have you...
I think the first one that I can think of was when I went to Ireland in 2007.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I lived in Ireland for the summer, and I actually read Ulysses when I was there.
Cool.
And there was a cool event. So, like, Ulysses, the whole story is that it takes place during, like, one day.
It does?
Yeah, so, like, the plot is that this guy relives the adventures of Ulysses or Odysseus through modern day Dublin over the course of 24 hours. And I think that's June. It's either June 12th or June 16th. One of those days.
It actually gives you the day that it takes place over?
Yeah. So on that day, every year, they have what's called Bloomsday after the main character. And there's all kinds of different like events throughout Ireland. And I was living in Galway, and Joyce's wife, Nora Barnacle, was from Galway.
Now, you said a moment ago that you were in Ireland. I'm
Yes.
catching you in a lie here because Galway is just outside St. John's there.
Well, the original Galway,
Yeah, I know.
west coast of Ireland.
I'm being silly.
No Danny Williams, no Danny Lynn. So she was from Galway, and her family home has been turned into like a little museum.
Okay.
So I went there on Bloomsday, and there was like a lot of like Joyce fans there, a lot of literature fans, and we all did readings of like the different books and stuff. So that was really cool.
That is cool.
Yeah. Other places, like I've been to Greece. That was awesome.
Wow.
Yeah. Literary. Germany.
Wow.
I got to see the castle where like
You are way more well traveled than me. I've been to Avondale.
nice.
Yeah.
Avondale's beautiful.
It is gorgeous. Yeah.
And in Germany, I saw the castle where like Snow White, I think, is based in there.
Really?
Can't remember. It was some famous one of the Grimm fairy tales in the castles.
Like whatever castle that drew inspiration from the castle in that story.
Yeah, I just saw it on the train though, but yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
That's really cool. All right, that's insane. That's a lot. That's a lot. That's no one's gonna top that answer. That's gonna have to be the last one.
Yeah. I was in Paris too, and that'll be the last one. And I went to the Shakespeare and Company, where like all the modernists used to hang out.
Wow.
In Montparnasse, I think is where it was. Yeah.
Okay.
And obviously, like everywhere in France, or everywhere in Paris, especially, it's famous writers used to drink here, so come in and spend extra money.
Yeah. Hemingway was here. There's a drink named after him.
Yeah, that's the fun. That's actually, I think I used this line in After Dark Vapors, where one of the characters goes to Paris, because I had this experience.
Yep.
And you go to a bar, and they're like, yeah, Hemingway and Joyce used to drink here, so they feel like they can charge extra for their drinks.
Yeah.
I was like, well, these guys were alcoholics.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
They drank everywhere, so don't feel so special.
Yeah.
Like,
that's fair.
I'm sure there's a bar in Idaho where he used to get drunk, too, so...
I can't get over that there's a whiskey, like that there's a Hemingway whiskey, and I'm like... This guy was an alcoholic who eventually killed himself, guys. Can we maybe not? Like,
man, yeah, I
gauche.
was in Cuba. I was there in Cuba in the winter, and there's like a lot of bars where it's like, oh, he'd come here and drink this type of drink, and so Hemingway's such a brand, though.
It is.
It's like I think there's you can get like a catalog of like, African adventure themed decor.
Yep.
And it's called like the Hemingway collection.
Oh, God.
And it's kind of like you can kind of imagine the kind of seats and stuff, and
yeah, I can see it.
Very like yuppie kind of lifestyle.
Perfect. Awesome.
I'm gonna be I go on a lot of tangents, so
no, that's fine. Tangents are great. Tangents fill up airtime.
Awesome.
Like last week I had someone on and I was like, have you gone on a literary pilgrimage? And their answer, I'm not kidding, was yes. And I'm like, that's going to be great. That's going to be great in the episode that we do that on.
Man, even here in Newfoundland, you can go on some great literary pilgrimages. You can go to Fairyland.
Fairyland, yeah.
Like, if you're a fan of Wayne Johnston.
Yeah.
Because they got, like, Baltimore's mansion there and stuff. And obviously Fairyland, I mean, there's...
Yeah.
Not only is there Wayne Johnston, but there's also... the writer, or the singer, sorry. Just died a couple years ago. Sonny's Dream.
Okay.
Hines.
Yeah.
So there's Hines and his nephew, Joel Hines.
Yeah, Joel Thomas Hines' his nephew.
Yeah. And so I mean, a lot of great artists in Fairyland. So I mean,
There's
you don't have to go to Greece.
no, on the Cape Shore, that's where Amanda's books are written and stuff like that
okay,
and set. You can go down there. Gross Moorn's a great spot just to
Yes.
sit and be relaxed and
Yeah.
write if you want to get stuff done and be cut off.
I think there's like a writer's retreat in Woody Point
Interesting.
that I think is like very popular.
A couple of the genre writers are actually trying to start a writer's retreat for next year, actually.
Yeah.
It's going to be fun.
Man, yeah, I love the West Coast of Newfoundland.
Cool. Thank you very much. Next on the line, we have Jamie Thomas on the line right now, all the way from Wenatchee, Washington. She is the author of Asperfell. Jamie Thomas, have you ever gone on a literary pilgrimage? Have you ever traveled to write?
Okay, not yet, but I have.
Well, you're not going to now.
Oh my God, no! And I'm so worried about this because I eventually, when I'm done with Asperfell, there is a really wonderful fairy tale that originated in County Donegal in Ireland, which is where my family comes from. And the last time I was out there was when I first became aware of it, and I really want to do a modern retelling of that. But I need to go out to do some research and to do some stuff, and I don't know when that's going to be possible. But I really, really love going to places where authors have written or are buried or that kind of thing. So when I was in Long Island last for a friend's wedding, I went to Walt Whitman's cottage there, and that was lovely. And then my favorite, being a Gothic novelist, was that my husband and I drove up to Tarrytown, where Sleepy Hollow is. And so we went to Sleepy Hollow Bridge, and I had to go into the cemetery, the old Dutch church cemetery, on the grounds where Washington Irving is buried, but it was closed because it was past 5 o'clock, and so they locked everything up. And I'm going to get arrested just for telling the story, but I climbed the fence.
Of course you did.
So that I could take a picture next to Washington Irving's grave. And of course I did. And so I would love to go to England to make a pilgrimage of the Bronte sisters and Austen herself. I have a friend who is from Yorkshire, and his parents, their backyard abuts a graveyard of a church, and Anne Bronte is buried there. So he made sure to go out for me and take a picture of that. But I hope that eventually we'll all be able to travel and to go on our writers' retreats someday. Someday, I hope.
Thank you very much. On the line, we have Bridget Canning, author of The Greatest Hits of Wanda Janes. What, if any, literary pilgrimages have you gone on?
A literary pilgrimage? Like traveling and writing, you mean?
Yeah, that's what one author put in. One author who was, I'm jealous of his travel log, went, and when he was writing his novel, went to every bar in Europe he could find that Hemingway went to try and channel that, which was interesting. I said I once went to Gross Moor and tried to write where it was quiet. You know what I mean? So there's a broad range there, and if you haven't gone on any, that's also fine.
As for traveling just to write, I leave my house all the time. Yeah, sometimes I find it very hard to write in my house because there's always something distracting, you know. So there's lots of little places that go around town. But I was really lucky last May to I did 2 weeks at the oh my god, what landfall in Brigus. The Kent Cottage in Brigus,
Okay.
which is where Rockwell Kent stayed, at the turn of the century, back in, I think, 1915. And it's this 200-year-old cottage stuck right in the side of the cliff overlooking Brigus Bay. It's absolutely beautiful. And last year I won the Cox and Palmer Award through Memorial, so they gave me 2 weeks there.
Wow.
And yes, so and it was. It's all off the grid, so you get up in the morning and you start the wood stove, and you can't plug in too many things, and you just kind of, there's beautiful places to hike, so that was really productive. But I did stay there alone a lot, and there is something about, it gets really dark, and you're in this cottage by yourself, and it's like, I hope there's no serial killers living in Brigus right now. But I kind of went to bed early a lot, so I could afford creeping myself out. But that was probably that was a wonderful experience then.
Awesome, good. Thank you very much. Next on the line we have Josh Connors. Connor or Connors?
Connors.
Oh, I thought so. Yeah. Josh Connors. There's two of them apparently. No. He is the author of Small Town Queer, both the play and the adaptation, novel or play or whatever you want to call it. Josh Connors, have you ever gone on what the question phrases as a literary pilgrimage? Have you ever traveled to write or be inspired for your writing?
Not on purpose. I didn't travel for the sake of being inspired to write, but a lot of my inspiration to start Small Town Queer and those stories and diving back into some old painful memories and stuff happened while I was visiting in New Zealand and just like seeing new places. And I think that was a little bit of, again, being sick of your environment or being, overwhelmed by the place that you live. We tend to want to run away or start over or see new things, but then you're kind of reminded that a lot of the stuff that is important is stuff you can't run away from. And I think that's where a lot of my writing comes from, is past experiences and things I've been through that maybe I, for 10, 15 years, have tried to black out and push to the back, and those are actually the things that make compelling stories.
Interesting. I agree. That's a great answer. Thank you very much. Next on the line, we have Kayla Krantz, who's calling in from Detroit. She's originally from Houston. She writes the Rituals of the Night series. Kayla Krantz, have you ever traveled to write, or what? Have you ever gone on a literary pilgrimage?
No, but I wish I could. Hopefully in the future.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much. Next up, we have Ellen Curtis, who is the author of the Infinity series from Engine Books, as well as the editor of the From the Rock anthology. What, if any, literary pilgrimages have you been on?
I've actually been on a few. A couple of years ago, I went to London, England in general. And so while I was in England, I went to the Globe Theatre to visit the Heart of Shakespeare, because that was one of my really, really big inspirations growing up. And I also visited 221 Baker Street.
Did you?
Yes.
That's cool.
It left a lot to be desired.
Well, I mean,
it's basically a glorified gift shop.
But to be fair, Baker Street existed before that did. It's like if they made... Imagine if my apartment number and street name was featured in a book that became famous, and all of a sudden there were just tourists hanging around outside my home.
But I mean, at least you'd have a cute little house then. This was kind of... I mean, there were better things you could do. When I went back to England a few years later... my whole reason for going was because we had won tickets to the Cursed Child Harry Potter play.
Okay.
well, reduced rate tickets. And so our whole reason for going there, my sister and I went, was to go to the play and go to Universal Studios. And it was like our big Harry Potter visit.
I see.
Yes.
Cool. Would you call that a literary pilgrimage because it was Harry Potter?
Yes.
I see.
I would.
Okay. Thank you very much. Next on the line, we have Tasha Madison. Have you ever traveled to write? Have you ever gone on a literary pilgrimage?
No, I wouldn't say I've necessarily gone on a literary pilgrimage. I feel like when I travel, I go to be inspired. I go to experience the culture around me, or visit family and friends. I wouldn't necessarily say I've traveled for a literary pilgrimage purpose.
Interesting. On that note, as an addendum that I don't usually get to ask, have you ever been to Canada?
I have.
Wonderful.
Yeah, way back in the day. I went there to snowboard, actually.
This is a great spot for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great spot for snowboarding and dying too young because you ate too much poutine. Those two things.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Paul Carberry, author of the Zombies on the Rock series from Engine Books. Paul, what literary pilgrimages, if any, have you been on? Have you ever traveled to do research or traveled somewhere to write or anything like that?
Just once with Zombies on the Rock. I actually went to Harry's River where I set the opening for the zombie novel. I wanted to make sure I got the scene right. So I actually parked my car, I got out and I walked down and up the river side, just the river banks, just like, hey, like the spot that I described, is there actually places like that along the river? And there are.
Cool.
So, yeah, that was probably the only time I ever did that.
That's really cool, though.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Good attention to detail. Thank you very much. Next up, we have B.C. Laybolt, the Canadian independent author of the 10th Lunan Regiment series, a military sci-fi saga. He also writes an immersive dark fantasy series. His current titles include To Drown in Sand, Juris Lunans, To Drown in Ash, The Dog, Bone, and Upon a Wake of Flame. B.C. Laybolt, what, if any, literary pilgrimages have you been on? Have you ever traveled to write or to gain inspiration for writing?
Oh, you're going to love this answer, actually. And this isn't disingenuous, it's serious. The best pilgrimage I ever took, well, two. There were two. So one was to the jungles of Belize because I was on a medical mission, and the jungle itself was so engrossing, and the culture of the people was so amazing that I took 2 notebooks worth of notes and brought them back and put them in a novel, it literally changed the way I wrote. The second one was actually a trip to St. John's. I'd never been to Newfoundland before, and I went up to visit my 2 sons. They're both going to MUN. And the minute I got off the plane, my wife, she just kept saying, "Where are you?" Because I was so distracted. We went to Cape Spear, I think it is.
Yeah, the most eastern point in all of North America.
Right, and so stories just came out of the rocks. I wrote like mad every day I was out there, and it changed the landscape of Newfoundland and St. John's. Changed the way I thought about the environment, the world that I'm writing in. I'm writing 2 things at once. One is a fantasy project, and one's a science fiction project. The fantasy project, it actually changed the structure of the world that I had created, and its people. So yeah, huge effect, traveling and recording what you see there.
You should make an excuse to come back and visit your sons during Sci-Fi on the Rock and get a table and experience that side of it as well as you travel around.
That would be cool. Yeah. My buddy Peter Foote has often told me that that's something I need to do. So I've got it on my bucket list.
Awesome. Well, maybe you and he it's on his bucket list too. Maybe you two should come down together at some point.
we should, yeah.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Erin Vance, Editor-in-Chief of Engine Books and the editor of the From the Rock anthology series. Have you ever gone on any literary pilgrimages? Have you ever gone somewhere to relax, to write, or edit? Or have you ever gone somewhere to research for writing or editing? Have you ever traveled in pursuit of your writing or editing-ness?
I have never traveled in pursuit of it, but I mean, I'm writing a novel and there's a scene where they go on a road trip, and that is very much inspired by a road trip that I took myself.
That counts.
It counts? Okay, then I went on a literary pilgrimage to find inspiration and also to take 7 weeks off work.
Cool. Who'd you go with?
My little brother.
That sounds interesting.
Basically, he was going on, he got let go of his job early because there was no construction. So my dad said, "Go west, young man," you know, that find yourself. Okay. And then I said, "That sounds like fun." And they said, "Oh, thank goodness our son won't die." So me and my brother went across Canada and back in a little 2-seater Eclipse Mitsubishi Spider. And I wrote a lot of stuff. I think I wrote like 30,000 words on that and edited like 2 books along the way.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's really fun.
It was.
Okay. So will that story of, not that story that was inspired, the 30,000 words, but will the story of your epic road trip ever make it to print? Do you think there'll be like a coming of age story where you and your brother go across Canada?
I think elements of it come through in other ways, especially the brother-sister relationship, because Michael and I spent an awful lot of time together, as you do when it's just the two of you in the big country.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think that's coming through, but I don't think I'm ever going to write the story of us getting violently ill in Montreal and hating Quebec as a result.
I see.
Yeah.
Vance versus Vance, attorneys at law.
Oh, you mean us fighting? Because that was very quickly solved by us just putting on Walk the Moon, Shut Up and Dance.
That's fair.
Every time he annoyed me.
That's fair. So that song was played a lot.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, daily.
Okay, excellent.
Thank you very much. Next on the line, we have Tracey Waddleton, who is from Trepassey, Newfoundland. She recently just put out a book through Breakwater Books called Send More Tourists, The Last Ones Were Delicious. Tracey Waddleton, what literary pilgrimages, if any, have you gone on? Have you ever traveled to write or get inspiration for writing?
Here goes the again. No, I haven't gone on any literary pilgrimages. I'm trying to reach into my head. You can edit all this later.
I could. I might not.
Right? You might not.
Yeah. Depends on how funny the pauses are.
Right. Well, I think we've been talking about it long enough now that you'll be forced to.
Yeah.
Literary pilgrimages. I haven't been on any. I think there's some I'd like to take. I think I'd like to, go see James Joyce's Ireland. I think that's pretty much the only one that really sticks in my head. Not that I'm a massive Joyce fan, but I don't really link literature and geography in my head that much.
We were speaking of Brad Dunne. He actually did that. He did James Joyce's Ireland.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, apparently
maybe it's the Irish heritage thing.
Yeah, I don't know if it's James Joyce's Ireland, but the Ulysses. There's a tour you can do because Ulysses supposedly takes place in real time. There's a tour you can do of Ireland that takes place in that time frame. So the tour takes you through Ulysses and stops you at places like bars and all this other stuff in the same time frame that the character would have in the book.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, maybe something like that, or I think there's a tour in Scotland where you can get on the Harry Potter train, but I don't know if that's like a literary pilgrimage.
I think that's really a literary pilgrimage.
I don't really link geography to books so much when I think about travel, I guess. So maybe I should have passed on that question. Maybe it's not the best.
No, it's fine. Okay.
The best question for me.
Thank you very much. Next on the line, we have Tanith Frost, best-selling author of the Immortal Solace series. Okay, Tanith Frost, what, if any, literary pilgrimages have you gone on? In other words, have you ever traveled to write or traveled to research for writing?
Honestly, the farthest I've actually gone for writing research is the St. John's area.
I live in central Newfoundland, so that's about a 4-hour drive for me, which is not long, but it has been very necessary for the Immortal Soulless series because some of the stories are set in St. John's, some are in the surrounding area, some of it's set closer to the West Coast. In the future, I'm really hoping to get in a major epic supernatural battle in Twillingate, if only because then I'll have to actually spend more time in Twillingate to research it. So that's it for those literary pilgrimages. On the other hand, there are a lot that I would love to make, not just for my own research, but just for the sake of going. I would love to go to Maine and maybe bump into Stephen King, maybe just see places that have inspired him. But that would be probably at the top of my list for reading-related pilgrimages that I would like to make, which are also, of course, writing-related.
Excellent. Yeah, Maine would be up on my top 10 list too, actually, for sure. Thank you very much. Next up, we have Ali House, author of the Segment Delta Archives series, as well as a frequent contributor to the From the Rock collection of anthologies.
All right.
Ali House, what literary pilgrimages have you been on? Have you ever traveled to write?
I have never traveled specifically to write, but often when I go on vacation with me, especially if I'm traveling alone. There was one time where I went to London and I knew I wanted to go to Paris for a day, so I knew that I could write on the Channel because I literally would have nothing else to do.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so I just, honestly, I have a book with me everywhere I go, and I mostly try to travel by, like, buses or trains. I try not to drive myself, because then I have the chance to write while I'm traveling.
Makes sense. Okay. Thank you very much. Next up, we have Peter Foote, owner of Fiction First Used Books, the founder of the Genre Writers of Atlantic Canada page, and frequent contributor to the From the Rock anthology. Peter, what literary pilgrimages have you been on?
Actually, no. It's something that I've always been fascinated by, and I have watched other people do it. For me to write, I need no distractions. I'm down in the den, the lights off, at my laptop, shutting the world off. As much as I'd like to explore, I don't actually think I'd be very productive as a writer while doing it. I might be one of these people that takes a whole lot of photos and then come back and reflect upon my experience and then be inspired. But I think I don't really think it'd work very well for me.
I don't think it would for me either. In all honesty, I think the furthest I've ever traveled to... I don't think I've ever traveled to write. I think I've traveled and written, but that's different.
Absolutely.
Yep. Thank you very much. Next on the line, we have Gareth Mitton, contributor to About Face and Dystopia from the Rock. Gareth, what, if any, literary pilgrimages have you gone on? By which I mean, have you ever traveled to write?
That's an interesting question. I kind of feel like my whole life has been traveling to write. That sounds really corny.
No?
But I mean, you know, I kind of grew up in northern England, sort of post-industrial, sort of quite sort of grey and grimy in the way that I kind of remember it. But I kind of had this fascination with the idea of traveling, but specifically Canada, funnily enough. In a geography class in high school, I remember my teacher saying that Canada was, and I don't know if this is accurate now, but this is how I remember it. He said it was 40 times the size of the UK with half the population.
Yeah, that's about right.
So I thought that concept really kind of, like, it was like a brain worm. It just planted itself in my head, this idea of, wow, think of all that space, you know, think of all the traveling and the exploring and writing that you could do. So specific pilgrimages, no, but, you know, I've lived in St. John's, I think, 3 times now, New Brunswick, Grosmorn, spent a year in Calgary. I grew up in England. I moved around a lot, and I find it hard to stay still. And I think that, you know, that all feeds, all those experiences really kind of feed the writing. And the writing sort of comes in spurts for me.
Okay.
Sometimes quite long, intense spurts, and, you know, that's just the way it is. And I try not to really kind of force it, but when something really kind of grabs me, then I have to write. But specific pilgrimages, not so much.
Okay. Lovely. All right. Well, thanks for coming on again. For all of you, we'll be here again next week at 4:30 Newfoundland time or online at chmr.ca. Please tune in and we'll talk more about writing culture in Newfoundland.